Hungary has made many contributions to the fields of folk, popular and classical music. Hungarian folk music is a prominent part of the national identity and continues to play a major part in Hungarian music. It is also strong in the Szabolcs-Szatmár area and in the southwest part of Transdanubia, near the border with Croatia. The Busójárás carnival in Mohács is a major Hungarian folk music event, formerly featuring the long-established and well-regarded Bogyiszló orchestra. Hungarian classical music has long been an experiment, made from Hungarian antedecents and on Hungarian soil, to create a conscious musical culture, using the musical world of the folk song. Although the Hungarian upper class has long had cultural and political connections with the rest of Europe, leading to an influx of European musical ideas, the rural peasants maintained their own traditions such that by the end of the 19th century Hungarian composers could draw on rural peasant music to create a Hungarian classical style. For example, copyright Bartók and Zoltán Kodály, two of Hungary's most famous composers, are known for using folk themes in their music. Bartók collected folk songs from across Eastern Europe, including Romania and Slovakia, whilst Kodály was more interested in creating a distinctively Hungarian musical style. During the era of communist rule in Hungary, a song committee scoured and censored popular music for traces of subversion and ideological impurity. Since then, however, the Hungarian music industry has begun to recover, producing successful performers in the fields of jazz such as trumpeter Rudolf Tompsits, pianist-composer Károly Binder and, in a modernized form of Hungarian folk, Ferenc Siba and Martac Pasteur copyright N. The three giants of Hungarian rock, Illa copyright S, Metrocubed and Omega, remain very popular, especially Omega, which has followings in Germany and beyond as well as in Hungary. Older veteran underground bands such as Beatrice from the 1980s also remain popular. Characteristics. Unlike most Western European peoples, the Hungarian people, Magyars, emerged from the intermingling of Finno-Ugric and Eastern Turkish peoples during the 5th to 8th centuries CE. This makes the origins of their traditional music unique in Europe. According to author Simon Broughton, the composer and song collector Kodály identified songs that apparently date back 2,500 years in common with the Mari people of Russia. And, as well as the Mari, the ethnomusicologist Bruno Nettel indicates similarities in traditional Hungarian music with Mongolian and Native American musical styles. Bent Szabolcs-Szatmár, however, claims that the Finno-Ugric and Turkish-Mongolian elements are present but cannot be attached to certain, definite national or linguistic groups. Nonetheless, Szabolcs-Szatmár claims links between Hungarian musical traditions and those of the Mari, Kalmyk, Ostyakh, Northwest Chinese, Tatar, Vogel, Anatolian Turkish, Bashkirian, Mongol and Chuvash musics. These, he claims, are evidence that Asian memories slumber in the depths of Hungarian folk music and that this folk music is the last Western link in the chant of ancient Eastern cultural relations. According to Broughton, traditional Hungarian music is highly distinctive like the Hungarian language, which invariably is stressed on the first syllable, lending a strongly accented dactylic rhythm to the music. Nettel identifies two essential features of Hungarian folk music to be the use of pentatonic scales composed of major seconds and minor thirds, and the practice of transposing a bit of melody several times to create the essence of a song. These transpositions are usually up or down a fifth, a fundamental interval in the series of overtones and an indication perhaps of the influence of Chinese musical theory in which the fifth is significant. According to Szabolcs-Szatmár, these Hungarian transpositions, along with some melodic, rhythmical and ornamental peculiarities, clearly show on the map of Eurasia the movements of Turkish people from the east to the west. The subsequent influence on neighboring countries' music is seen in the music of Slovakia and, with intervals of the third or second, in the music of the Czech Republic. Hungarian and other Finno-Ugric musical traditions are also characterized by the use of an upper binary musical form, with Hungary itself especially known for the AAAA variant, where the B sections are the A sections transposed up or down a fifth. Modern Hungarian folk music evolved in the 19th century, and is contrasted with previous styles through the use of arched melodic lines as opposed to the more archaic descending lines. Music history. The earliest documentation of Hungarian music dates from the introduction of Gregorian chant in the 11th century. By that time, Hungary had begun to enter the European cultural establishment with the country's conversion to Christianity and their musically important importation of plain song, a form of Christian chant. Though Hungary's early religious musical history is relatively well documented, secular music remains mostly unknown, though it was apparently a common feature of community festivals and other events. The earliest documented instrumentation in Hungary dates back to the whistle in 1222, the cobas around 1237 to 1325, the bugle in 1355, the fiddle in 1358, the bagpipe in 1402, the lute in 1427 and the trumpet in 1428. Thereafter the organ came to play a major role. The 16th century saw the rise of Transylvania as a centre for Hungarian music. It also saw the first publication of music in Hungary, in Kraków W. At this time Hungarian instrumental music was well known in Europe. The lutenist and composer Bálint Backfog, for example, was famed as a virtuoso player. His compositions pioneered a new style of writing for the lute based on vocal polyphony. The lutenist brothers Melchior and Konrad Nyusigula were also noted, as was Stefan Monetarius, the author of an important early work in music theory, the Epitoma Utriusque Musics. During the 17th century, Hungary was divided into three parts: an area controlled by the Turks, an area controlled by the Habsburgs, and Transylvania. Historic songs declined in popularity and were replaced by lyrical poetry, whilst minstrels were replaced by court musicians. Many courts or households maintained large ensembles of musicians who played the trumpet, whistle, cymbalum, violin or bagpipes. Some of these ensemble musicians were German, Polish, French or Italian. The court of Gábor Bethlen, Prince of Transylvania, included a Spanish guitarist. Little detail about the music played during this era survives, however. Musical life in the areas controlled by the Ottoman Turks declined precipitously, with even the formerly widespread and entrenched plain song style disappearing by the end of the 17th century. Outside of the Ottoman area, however, plain song flourished after the establishment of Protestant missions in around 1540, while a similarly styled form of folk song called verse chronicles also arose. During the 18th century, some of the students at colleges such as those in Zárospatak and Székelyudvarhely were minor nobles from rural areas who brought with them their regional styles of music. Whilst the choirs in these colleges adopted a more polyphonic style, the student songbooks indicate a growth in the popularity of homophonic songs. Their notation, however, was relatively crude and no extensive collection appeared until the publication of a Do Empala Cubed Xihorvathar Euro unregistered trademark SATAR paragraph DFA copyright LSZAZA Permilnik in 1853. These songs indicate that during the mid to late 18th century the previous Hungarian song styles died out and musicians looked more to other European styles for influence. The 18th century also saw the rise of Verbunkos, a form of music initially used by army recruiters. Like much Hungarian music of the time, melody was treated as more important than lyrics, although this balance changed as Verbunkos became more established. Folk music. Hungarian folk music changed greatly beginning in the 19th century, evolving into a new style that had little in common with the music that came before it. Modern Hungarian music was characterized by an arched melodic line, strict composition, long phrases and extended register, in contrast to the older styles which always utilize a descending melodic line. Modern Hungarian folk music was first recorded in 1895 by Bar copyright La Vicana, setting the stage for the pioneering work of Bar copyright La Barta Cubed K, Zoltán Kodály and La Szedla Cubed Lajtha in musicological collecting. Modern Hungarian folk music began its history with the Habsburg Empire in the 18th century, when Central European influences became paramount, including a regular metric structure for dancing and marching instead of the free speech rhythms of the old style. folk music at that time consisting of village bagpipers who were replaced by string-based orchestras of the Gypsy, or Roma people. In the 19th century, Roma orchestras became very well known throughout Europe, and were frequently thought of as the primary musical heritage of Hungary, as in Franz Liszt's Hungarian dances and rhapsodies, which used Hungarian Roma music as representative of Hungarian folk music. Hungarian Romani music is often represented as the only music of the Roma, though multiple forms of Roma music are common throughout Europe and are often dissimilar to Hungarian forms. In the Hungarian language, 19th-century folk styles like the Czardas and the Verbunkos are collectively referred to as Szigonyzen, which translates literally as gypsy music. Hungarian nationalist composers, like Bartók, rejected the conflation of Hungarian and Roma music, studying the rural peasant songs of Hungary which, according to music historian Bruno Nettel, has little in common with Roma music, a position that is held to by some modern writers, such as the Hungarian author Bálint Zárósi. Simon Broughton, however, has claimed that Roma music is no less Hungarian and has more in common with peasant music than the folklorists like to admit, and authors Marion Cotton and Adelaide Bradburn claim that Hungarian Roma music was perhaps originally Hungarian in character, but it is difficult to tell what is Hungarian and what is the authentic music of the Roma. The ethnic Czar and Gar-cubed Hungarians of Moldavia's Siret Valley have moved in large numbers to Budapest, and become a staple of the local folk scene with their distinctive instrumentation using flutes, fiddles, drums and the lute. Prominent folk ensembles, such as the Hungarian Folk Orchestra, the Danube Folk Ensemble and the Hungarian State Folk Ensemble have regular performances in Budapest and are a popular attraction for visitors. Verbunkos. In the 19th century, Verbunkos was the most popular style in Hungary. This consisted of a slow dance followed by a faster dance. This dichotomy, between the slower and faster dances, has been seen as the two contrasting aspects of the Hungarian character. The rhythmic patterns and embellishments of the Verbunkos are distinctively Hungarian in nature, and draw heavily upon the folk music composed in the early part of the century by Antal Czermak, Ferdinand Kauer, Janos Levota and others. Verbunkos was originally played at recruitment ceremonies to convince young men to join the army, and was performed, as in so much of Hungarian music, by Roma bands. One Verbunkos tune, the Ra-Car-cubed Gzai March, became a march that was a prominent part of compositions by both Liszt and Hector Berlioz. The 18th-century origins of Verbunkos are not well known, but probably include old dances like the Swineherd dance and the Hujab dance, as well as elements of Balkan, Slavic and Levantine music, and the cultured music of Italy and Vienna, all filtered through the Roma performers. Verbunkos became wildly popular, not just among the poor peasantry, but also among the upper-class aristocratics, who saw Verbunkos as the authentic music of the Hungarian nation. Characteristics of Verbunkos include the Boka-Za-cubed cadence pattern, the use of the interval of the augmented second, garlands of triplets, widely arched, free melodies without words, and alternately swift and slow tempi. By the end of the 18th century, Verbunkos was in use in opera, chamber and piano music, and in song literature, and was regarded as the continuation, the resurrection of ancient Hungarian dance and music, and its success signified the triumph of the people's art. The violinist Pana Zinka was among the most celebrated musicians of the 19th century, as was the Roma bandleader János Bihari, known as the Napoleon of the fiddle. Bihari, Antal Czermak and other composers helped make Verbunkos the most important expression of the Hungarian musical romanticism, and have it the role of national music. Bihari was especially important in popularizing and innovating the Verbunkos. He was the incarnation of the musical demon of fiery imagination. Bihari and others after his death helped invent Na-cubta, a popular form written by composers like La-cubed Ra and T. Frata, Lapad Balazs, Pista Danka cubed, Bar copyright Neagresi, Maya K. Rankin cubed Tsava paragraph LGYI and I'm Farkas. Many of the biggest names in modern Hungarian music are the Verbunkos playing Locatos family, including Zanda Locatos and Rabi Locatos. Roma music equals. Though the Roma are primarily known as the performers of Hungarian styles like Verbunkos, they have their own form of folk music that is largely without instrumentation, in spite of their reputation in that field outside of the Roma community. Roma music tends to take on characteristics of whatever music the people are around, however, embellished with twists and turns, trills and runs, making a very new, and distinctively Roma style. Though without instruments, Roma folk musicians use sticks, tapped on the ground, rhythmic grunts and a technique called oral basing which vocally imitates the sound of instruments. Some modern Roma musicians, like Andodrum, Romanodrum, Romani Rota and Kalai Jag have added modern instruments like guitars to the Roma style, while Gula Babo's project Romani has used elements of avant-garde jazz. Hungarian music abroad equals. Ethnic Hungarians live in parts of Romania, Serbia, Slovakia, the United States and elsewhere. Of these, the Hungarian population of Romania, being the more rural, outer rims of the Kingdom of Hungary, has had the most musical impact on Hungarian folk music. The Hungarian community in Slovakia has produced the rootsy band Gimes, who play in the Tarn-Chaz tradition. The Serbian region of Vojvodina is home to a large Hungarian minority. Transylvanian folk music remains a vital part of life in modern Transylvania. Bartók and Kodály found Transylvania to be a fertile area for folk song collecting. Folk bands are usually a string trio, consisting of a violin, viola and double bass, occasionally with a cymbalum. The first violin, or prima s, plays the melody, with the others accompanying and providing the rhythm. Transylvania is also the original home of the Tarn-Chaz tradition, which has since spread throughout Hungary. Tarn-Chaz equals. Tarn-Chaz is a dance music movement which first appeared in the 1970s as a reaction against state-supported homogenized folk music. They have been described as a cross between a barn dance and folk club, and generally begin with a slow-tempo verbunkos, followed by swift Xardas dances. Xardas is a very popular Hungarian folk dance that comes in many regional varieties, and is characterized by changes in tempo. Tarn-Chaz began with a folk song collecting of musicians like Bar Copyright La Halmos and Ferenc Sheba, who collected rural instrumental and dance music for popular, urban consumption, along with the dance collectors Gyar Paragraph Rgy Martin and Zanda Timoir. The most important rural source of these songs was Transylvania, which is actually in Romania but has a large ethnic Hungarian minority. The instrumentation of these bands, based on Transylvanian and sometimes the southern Slovak Hungarian communities, included a fiddle on lead with violin, a contra, and bow double bass, and sometimes a cymbalum as well. Many of the biggest names in modern Hungarian music emerged from the Tarn-Chaz scene, including Mutsika S and Martac Pasteur copyright N. Other bands include Vujicics, Janissy, Tar copyright K and Kalamaja, while singers include Permel Varfarbia N and Andra Spirek. Famous instrumentalists include fiddlers Xabla Kra Paragraph S and Bala Zs Vasili, cymbalomist Klman Balov, violinist Far copyright Lix Lajacubed and multi-instrumentalist Mira Lidrish. Classical music. Hungary's most important contribution to the worldwide field of European classical music is probably Franz Liszt, a renowned pianist in his own time and a well-regarded composer of 19 Hungarian rhapsodies and a number of symphonic poems such as Lepra copyright Ludes. Liszt was among the major composers during the late 19th century, a time when modern Hungarian classical music was in its formative stage. Along with Liszt and his French Romantic tendencies, Ferenc Erkel's Italian and French-style operas, with Hungarian words, and Mira Limaszany's German classical style, helped set the stage for future music, and their influence is unsurpassed even by their successors, because in addition to their individual abilities they bring about an unprecedented artistic intensification of the Romantic musical idiom, which is practically consumed by this extreme passion. Elements of Hungarian folk music, especially verbunkos, became an important element of many composers, both Hungarians like Kalman Simonfi and foreign composers like Ludwig van Beethoven. Hungary has also produced Carl Goldmark, composer of the Rustic Wedding Symphony, composer and pianist Erna Dohnányi, composer and ethnomusicologist Leszedla Kubdlajtha, and the piano composer Stephen Heller. A number of violinists from Hungary have also achieved international renown, especially Joseph Joachim, Gina Hubey, Edward Riemer copyright NE, Zander var copyright GH, Franz von Vesey, Ede Zothuritsky, Emil Telmany and Leopold Auer. Hungarian-born conductors include Antal Doroti, Adam, Gyau Paragraph Gy and Ivo N. Fischer, Eugene Normandy, Fritz Reiner, George Sull and Georg Solti. Pianists of international renown, Gar copyright Tsar Ander, Tama S. Varzar Awy, Georges Schifra, Annie Fischer, Zolta N. Coxis, Desira Nki, Andra S. Schiff and Gina Jandakubed. Hungarian opera equals. The origins of Hungarian opera can be traced to the late 18th century, with the rise of imported opera and other concert styles in cities like Pozsony, Kismaton, Nagyszeben and Budapest. Operas at the time were in either the German or Italian style. The field Hungarian opera began with school dramas and interpolations of German operas, which began at the end of the 18th century. School dramas in places like the Pauline School and Czartoryl Georgelli, the Calvinist School in Kserga and the Piarist School in Bestus. Pozsony produced the first music drama experiments in the country, though the work of Gaspar Paka and Jakub Zsef Tudi. It was the latter's 1793 Prince Pikakubed and Jutka Perzsi that is generally considered the first opera in a distinctively Hungarian style. The text of the piece was translated from Prinz Schnudi und Prinzessin Evekathal by Philip Höfner. This style was still strongly informed by the Viennese Oberpost style of comedic play, and remained thus throughout the 19th century. Though these operas used foreign styles, the idyllic, lyric and heroic parts of the story were always based on Verbunkos, which was becoming a symbol of the Hungarian nation during this time. It was not until the middle of the 19th century that Ferenc Erkel wrote the first Hungarian-language opera, using French and Italian models, thus launching the field of Hungarian opera. Bartók and Kodály equals. At the end of the 19th century, Hungarian music was dominated by compositions in the German classical style, while Viennese-style operettas gained immensely in popularity. This ended beginning in about 1905, when Enderad's poems were published. Composer bar copyright La Bartók was published for the first time, and Zoltán N. Kodály began collecting folk songs. Bartók and Kodály were two exceptional composers who created a distinctively Hungarian style. Bartók collected songs across Eastern Europe, though much of his activity was in Hungary, and he used their elements in his music. He was interested in all forms of folk music, while Kodály was more specifically Hungarian in his outlook. In contrast to previous composers who worked with Hungarian idioms, Kodály and Bartók did not conflate Roma and ethnic Hungarian music, specifically seeking out the latter at the expense of the former. Their work was a watershed that incorporated every great tradition of the Hungarian people, and influenced all the later composers of the country. Later 20th century For the first half of the 20th century, Bartók and Kodály were potent symbols for a generation of composers, especially Kodály. Starting in about 1947, a revival in folk choir music began, ended as an honest force by 1950, when state-run art became dominant with the rise of communism. Under communism, omitment and ideological affiliation measured by the musical style of a composer. The ignominious adjectives formalistic and cosmopolitan gain currency. Identified with a major mode, the classical aria, rondo or sonata form, the chord sequences distilled from Kodály's works. Music was uniformly festive and optimistic, with every deviation arousing suspicion. This simplicity led to a lack of popular support from the public, who did not identify with the sterile approved styles. The most prominent composers of this period were Endis Server Nszky and Lajos Bardos. Beginning in about 1955, a new wave of composers appeared, inspired by Bartók and breathing new life into Hungarian music. Composers from this era included Ferenc Szabó, Endis Serva Nszky, Pavel Kadosa, Ferenc Farkas and Gyár Paragraph Rgy. These composers both brought back old techniques of Hungarian music, as well as adapting imported avant-garde and modernist elements of Western classical music. Gyár Paragraph Rgy Ligeti and Gyár Paragraph Rgy Kurtigi are often mentioned in the same sentence. They were born near each other in Transylvania and studied in Budapest in the 1940s. Both were influenced by Stockhausen. Kurtigi's modernism borrowed many influences from the past. By contrast, Ligeti invented a new language with chromatic tone clusters and elements of parody. Both were multilingual and became exiles. This is reflected in the texts for their works. The foundation of the new music studio in 1970 helped further modernize Hungarian classical music, though promoting composers that felt audience education was as important a consideration as artistic merit in composition and performance. These studio's well-known composers include Leszedla Kubdvidovsky, Leszedla Kubza Ry and Zoltán Jenny. Mikla Kubdes Rankin Kubza, who studied in Germany and eventually settled in the United States, achieved international recognition for his Hollywood film scores as well as his concert music. Popular music. Hungarian popular music in the early 20th century consisted of light operettas and the Roma music of various styles. Nagy Műzsátka, the Broadway of Budapest, was a major center for popular music, and boasted enough nightclubs and theaters to earn its nickname. In 1945, however, this era abruptly ended and popular music was mostly synonymous with the patriotic songs imposed by the Russian communists. Some operettas were still performed, though infrequently, and any music with Western influences was seen as harmful and dangerous. In 1956, however, liberalization began with the 3TS, and a long period of cultural struggle began, starting with a battle over African American jazz. Jazz became a part of Hungarian music in the early 20th century, but did not achieve widespread renown until the 1970s, when Hungary began producing internationally known performers like the Benko Dixieland Band and bar copyright La Saxa Locatos. Other renowned performers from the younger generation are the Hot Jazz Band and the Boa copyright M Ragtime Jazz Band. Rock. In the early 1960s, Hungarian youths began listening to rock in droves, in spite of condemnation from the authorities. Three bands dominated the scene by the beginning of the 1970s, Illa Copyright S, Metrocubed and Omega, all three of which had released at least one album. A few other bands recorded a few singles, but the record-producing company, a state-run record label, did not promote or support these bands, which quickly disappeared. In 1968, the new economic mechanism was introduced, intending on revitalizing the Hungarian economy, while the band Illa Copyright S won almost every prize at the prestigious Tangdal Festival. In the 1970s, however, the Russians cracked down on subversives in Hungary, and rock was a major target. The band Illa Copyright S was banned from performing and recording, while Metrocubed and Omega left. Some of the members of these bands formed a supergroup, Lokomotiv GT, that quickly became very famous. The remaining members of Omega, meanwhile, succeeded in achieving stardom in Germany, and remained very popular for a time. Rock bands in the late 1970s had to conform to the record company's demands and ensure that all songs passed the inspection of the song committee, who scoured all songs looking for ideological disobedience. LGT was the most prominent band of a classic rock style that was very popular, along with Illa Copyright S, Burgundy and Zora N, while there were other bands like the Sweet and Middle of the Road who catered to the desires of the song committee, producing rock-based pop music without a hint of subversion. Meanwhile, the disco style of electronic music produced such performers as the officially sanctioned Nyota on Familia, and Beatrice in Sa plus or minus Es Judit, while the more critically acclaimed progressive rock scene produced bands like East, V73, Color and Pantera. In the early 1980s, economic and cultural depression racked Hungary, leading to a wave of disillusioned and alienated youth, exactly the people that rock, and the burgeoning worldwide field of punk rock, spoke to the most. Major bands from this era included Beatrice, who had moved from disco to punk and folk-influenced rock and were known for their splashy, uncensored and theatrical performances, P-Mobile, Bikini, Hobo Blues Band, a bluesy duo, A.E. Bezutza G, a cubed Parkiada Cubed, Siame and Edamar plus or minus Vec. The 1980s saw the record production company broken up because Hungary's authorities realized that restricting rock was not effective in reducing its effect. They instead tried to water it down by encouraging young musicians to sing about the principles of communism and obedience. The early part of the decade saw the arrival of punk and new wave music in full force, and the authorities quickly incorporated those styles as well. The first major prison sentences for rock-related subversion were given out, with the members of the punk band CPG sentenced to 2 years for political incitement. By the end of the decade and into the 1990s, internal problems made it impossible for the Hungarian government to counter the activities of rock and other musical groups. After the collapse of the communist government, the Hungarian scene became more and more like the styles played in the rest of Europe. Electronic music clubbing and electronic dance music started gaining popularity in Hungary following the change of regime in 1989 and corresponding to electronic music's increasing popularity in the worldwide musical mainstream. The political freedom and cultural boom of Western culture opened the way for the clubbing scene, with several venues starting all around the country, especially in Budapest and around Lake Balaton. The 1990s also marked the creation of several dance formations, notably Soho Party, Splash, Narc and also rave formations such as Emergency House and Cosmix. Notable techno and house DJs are Sturbanski, D, and New. The workings of the scene culminated in events like Budapest Parade, the largest such street festival in Hungary, that was held yearly from 2000 to 2006, attracting more than 500,000 visitors. The history of electronic dance music and techno culture in Hungary is documented in Ferenc Kár paragraph Mlady's book Far copyright Nikated release. A thriving underground scene was marked by the start of Tilos Rádió Cubed in 1991, the first free independent community station, starting out as a pirate radio. The station soon developed strong ties with the first alternative electronic formations, and inspired to start many others. Bands like Kodály Paragraph M and Mars Far Copyright L started, playing ambient, psychedelic music. Anima Sound System, one of the most influential bands on the scene, was created in 1993 playing dub and trip-hop influenced by acid jazz and ethnic music. Several other bands and formations followed, like Kolostar and Neo. Neo has won a worldwide reputation for their unique electro-pop style in the Mozart of Pop Music Award they received for their soundtrack album called Control. Apart from Anima, ethnic and folk influenced the scene in many ways, exemplified by formations like Balkan Fanatic, or Mitsura. One of the most successful Hungarian electronic musician is Yonderboy, who recently co-created Angstrom 1/2 Agar, gaining wide reputation in the country. In the past few years, dubstep has gained popular attention as well, nationwide. Experimental and minimal scene is in its early age, although several crews and DJs are working, organizing numerous events. Notable performers include COP, Kavik, Ferenc Vaspa Paragraph Iri and Isu. Hip-hop Hip-hop and rap have been developing in Hungary with two scenes, underground and mainstream, which is mostly popular among young people in Hungary. Underground rappers condemn the mainstream for selling their music and usually provide deeper message. Mainstream hip-hop is dominated by the pioneer of gangster rap in Hungary, Gangsta Zuli, and there are also other famous ones including Funkadeli, Sub Bass Monster, Dope Man, and LL Jr. Mainstream hip-hop is extremely popular among the Romani youth. Bar LGA started as an offshoot hip-hop project at Tilos Rádió Cubed. As lyrical innovators and phenomenal parodists, they gained wide popularity for an extremely explicit criticism of Budapest public transport company BKV, as well as hilarious wordplays and self-irony. Their lyrics are significant beyond the hip-hop scope as a cultural documentation of turn-of-the-millennia culture of Hungary. Hungarian slam sessions are rare and few, and still a novelty for the mainstream, but are gaining popularity with literary performers, MCs and audiences alike. Hardcore, metal despite being unknown among most Hungarian people, hardcore and metal are flourishing styles of music in Hungary. Metal bands are formed all over the country. Dominant styles are death metal, black metal and thrash. There are also power metal, folk metal and heavy metal groups, including Tocreate and Influx. Hardcore and metalcore are most common in Budapest and western Hungary, in towns like Kodály, Szolnok, Szombathely and Vészpre copyright M, but eastern Hungary and Debrecen is getting into a more and more important place in the hardcore scene. The first Hungarian acts that tagged themselves hardcore like AMD, Luca copyright Mia, Marina Review emerged in the late 1980s, and were followed by a number of acts, constituting a scene that flourishes since the early 1990s. Notable bands were Dawncore and Newborn of the late 90s, gaining also some international success. Members of these bands went on to form Bridge to Solace and the Idoru. Other important, active bands, Hold X True, Villain and Two Ashes, Embers, Suicide Pride, Subscribe, Shell Beach, Hatred Solution, Blind Myself, Superbutt, Stillborn. An internationally known band is Ectomorph, infusing heavy ethnic content with harsh vocals, one of North America's most popular metal band with record sales over 2 million albums. Five Finger Death Punch was formed by the Hungarian-born, Golden God Shredder award-winning guitarist Zoltán Bathory. Extreme hardcore punk and grindcore bands from Hungary include Jack, Human Error, Crustcore, Step On It, Another Way, Galazat. Indie. The origins of the Hungarian indie music scene go back to the early 1980s when Oracubed Parkjadacubed, Siami and Balaton released their records. The first revival took place in the mid-1990s when bands like Sexbill gained international success, followed by Heaven Street 7. The second and most notable revival of the indie alternative scene took place in the mid-2000s when bands like Amber Smith, the Moogs signed to international labels. Other notable bands include EZ Basic, the KOLIN and Dawnstar. The Hungarian indie scene is closely intertwined with electronic music, therefore artists like Yonderboy and Angstrom 1/2 Agar are often considered part of the indie scene. The Hungarian indie music of its special, Hungarian-languaged line. It is based rather on the 1980s bands like Oracubed Parkjadacubed or Neurotic. The most notable bands and artists are Kispa LA copyright SA Borts, Hyperkarma, and Quimby. Punk. The origins of the Hungarian punk movement go back to the early 80s, when a handful of bands like ETA, QSS, CPG, and Oracubed Ra emerged as angry young men playing fast and raw punk rock music. Like many other musicians of their age, they often criticized the communist government. They were a part of the national movement to reject the oppressiveness, and particularly the censorship, of the communist regime. As their music was on the verge of acceptance both by the public and the authorities, concerts were held under tight police control, and often caused moral outrage. With band members often living under constant surveillance, prison was a serious possibility. 2 members of the band CPG were found guilty and sent to prison for 2 years for allegedly unmoral lyrics. After their release, they had to leave Hungary, as did Oracubed Raw unregistered trademark S lead singer. The change of regime in 1989 brought a new situation, and bands now revolted against corruption and the Americanization of the country. They felt that the new system retained the bad things from the previous one, but lacked the good things that many expected. In lyrics, they often mention the newly appearing organized crime, and the still low standard of living. Today the Hungarian punk scene is low profile, but vibrant with several active bands, often touring the country and beyond. Summer brings a slew of punk and alternative festivals where they can all be sampled. Top venues playing punk music around Budapest include Var Paragraph R Paragraph S Yuck, Borga Paragraph Dar Paragraph R, Music Factory and A38 Hajar Cubed. Major bands include Orchestra, the oldest Hungarian punk band with 25 years of history, come from the northwest Hungarian town of Kodály, and their originally street punk music has been recently updated with a ska punk flavor. Ha copyright tka paragraph ZNA Pixala Cube Da Sok, a simplistic but powerful punk band, most popular in the end of the 1990s. They, similarly to Junkies, Far One Quarter Gera Cubed Kalabak, and Prosectora, are part of the new wave of punk bands that had risen in the mid-late 1990s in Hungary. Out of the newer bands, two northeast Hungarian bands are the most known, both playing California punk. Alvin copyright SA Ma Cubed Kusok come from Nyara Horza, while Maxkana Dragia from Sulga Cubed Tarduen. Festivals, venues and other institutions. Folk and classical music Budapest, the capital and music center of Hungary, is one of the best places to go in Hungary to hear really good folk music, says world music author Simon Broughton. The city is home to an annual folk festival called Chaztalkoza Cubed, which is a major part of the modern music scene. The Budapest Spring Festival along with the Budapest Autumn Festival are large-scale cultural events every year. The Budapesti Festival Zeneka has recently been awarded the Editor's Choice Gramophone Award. Long-standing venues in Budapest include the Philharmonic Society, the Opera House of Budapest, the Academy of Music, which opened in 1875 with President Franz Liszt and director Ferenc Erkel, and which has remained the center for music education in the country since. Popular music festivals Several musical festivals have been launched since the early 1990s, propelled by increasing demand of the developing youth culture. Aside from country-wide events like Szeged Festival or Hegyalja Festival, local festivals started to emerge since the first half of the first decade of the new millennium, with the aim to showcase known bands in all regions of Hungary. Growing out of a low-profile student meeting in 1993, Szeged Festival became one of the largest open-air festival in the world, taking place each summer in the heart of Budapest, the 108-hectare island. Visited by hundreds of thousands from all over Europe, it is the largest cultural event in Hungary, inviting world-class performers from all genres. Also having a history from 1993, Volt Festival is the second-largest music festival in the country, held each year in Sopron. With a colorful mix of musical styles, and popularity increasing each year, is considered to be the cheaper version of Szeged. Also founded by the Szeged management, Balaton Sound is a festival of mainly electronic music, held yearly in Zama Di, next to Lake Balaton. With prestigious performers and exclusive surroundings, it tries to position itself as a high-standard event. Hegyalja Festival, held in Tocreate, the historic wine region of the country, is the largest such event in the northern part. Visited by 50,000 guests each year, it showcases mainly hard rock and rock formations, but many more genres are present. Balaton, another major event near Lake Balaton, is held in Zárnka. Magyar Szeged, held in Varay, has a nationalist theme, with mainly right-wing performers, bands representing the recently emerged nationalistic rock, folk and folk rock. As a tradition, each larger university holds a periodical music festival, University Days, of various size. The largest one is Penn. Examples of smaller, local festivals are SZIN held in Szeged, the Free Utkazen Festival held on the streets of Vízpra copyright M, Pana Kubnia Festival in Vara Pelota, or the recently started Fishing on Orfa +/-, held on the beach of the Orfa +/- lake. Funding The Hungarian Ministry of Culture helps to fund some forms of music, as does the government-run National Cultural Fund. Non-profit organizations in Hungary include the Hungarian Jazz Alliance and the Hungarian Music Council. See also, Contra, Hungary and the Eurovision Song Contest. References: Broughton, Simon. Mark Ellingham with James McInarchie and Ola Duane, eds. A Musical Mother Tongue. Rough Guide to World Music, Volume 1, Africa, Europe and the Middle East. London. Rough Guides pages 159-167. ISBN 1-85828-636-0. Szabolcs-Szatmár, Bence. A Concise History of Hungarian Music. Retrieved August 24, 2007. From TARNCHAZ to Concert Band. Central Europe Review. Retrieved August 24, 2007. Beat and Rock Music in Hungary. Central Europe Review. Retrieved August 24, 2007. Cotton, Marion. Adelaide Bradburn. Music Throughout the World. Summy Burchard Company. 2005 HTM hand grenade explodes outside home of ethnic Hungarian leader in Vojvodina, Serbia. Hungarian Human Rights Foundation. Retrieved August 24, 2007. Crowcubed, Gyau paragraph RGY. Hungarian music since 1945 inches. Retrieved August 24, 2007. Salipsky, Ender, ed. Brief History of Music in Hungary. Ministry of Foreign Affairs Budapest. Retrieved August 24, 2007. Nettel, Bruno. Folk and Traditional Music of the Western Continents. Prentice Hall, Incorporated. Balint, Czar Rossi. Hungarian Gypsy Music, Whose Heritage? The Hungarian Quarterly. Retrieved September 24, 2005. Stephen, Sisa. Hungarian Music. The Spirit of Hungary. Retrieved August 24, 2007. Improvising in the Dark, Hungarian Jazz on Long Road to Mass Appeal. On the Globe. Retrieved August 24, 2007. Hungarian Music. Hungary Who? Retrieved August 24, 2007. Notes. Further reading, Bartók K., Bar Copyright La. Hungarian Folk Music. Ams Prairie. ISBN 0-404-16600-8. Dobsey, La SZLA Cubed. A History of Hungarian Music. Kavina. ISBN 963-13-3498-8. KLDY, Gula. History of Hungarian Music. Reprint Services Corporation. ISBN 0-7812-0246-9. Kodály, Zoltán. Folk Music of Hungary. Barry and Rockcliffe. Czar Rossi, Balint. Folk Music, Hungarian Musical Idiom. Kavina. ISBN 963-13-2220-3. Semir, Anna. Up from the Underground, The Culture of Rock Music in Post-Socialist Hungary. Penn State University Press. ISBN 0-271-02133-0. Sither, Tar 1/4 NDE. A Magyar Zine Szars Ade. Megaskaido. ISBN 963-8278-68-4. External links, French, audio clips, Traditional Music of Hungary. Music Copyright d'Ethnographie de Genève. Access November 25, 2010. Hungarian music summarized at the administrative website of Hungary, Hungarian Folk Music Collection, NA Copyright PDALOK and Magyar NA Kubta, Urban Hungarian Music or Magyar NA Kubta, YouTube playlists.